Madeline Shannon, California State House reporter for the Center Square, joins us. Madeline, you have a story looking at a bill that would impose or possibly look to impose a per-mile tax on California drivers. We've seen this type of idea pop up before, but it really hasn't advanced. What are you looking at in the Golden State?
So Assembly Bill 1421 seeks to establish a committee to study the impacts and feasibility of replacing the state's gas tax with a per-mile road user charge. And legislators are looking to replace the gas tax with something else like the road user charge because of declining gas tax revenues coming to the state in the last few years, largely due to the fact that there are a lot more electric vehicle drivers in California than there used to be. Between 2011 and 2025, more than 2.5 million electric vehicles were sold in California, and more than 400,000 of those were sold in 2025 alone.
Now, if you look at some of the information you gathered for your story from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, it highlights just that exact fact. Almost 14 million gallons in fiscal year 21 and 22 sold, while just a few years later, that's down to 13.3 million gallons sold. So clearly there's a drastic drop there in the amount of gallons being sold. But California obviously has some of the highest gas taxes, Maddie. Does that play into this equation at all?
A little bit. I know that the gas tax has gone up a little bit every year between 51 cents and 59 cents. And even though that does result in more gas tax revenues, lawmakers know that that might not be a sustainable solution long term. So they're looking to other things like this per mile road user charge. I know that some organizations have voiced support for something like that if it applies to all drivers equally, not just electric vehicle car drivers. But then others say that it's an invasive tax if it were to be invoked or imposed, and impractical to enforce.
Now, you're there at the State House grounds in California doing your reporting. Does this thing look like it could advance? And what would the implication be for the taxpayer? Would it just be a study to look into it, or would they actually be advancing this if this bill makes it across the finish line?
Well, this bill really would just establish a committee to study the impacts of imposing a per mile road user charge. This bill does not actually impose the charge itself. This would just be the first step in looking at how that could impact the state and the feasibility of rolling it out, and if it is indeed practical.
Now, Maddie, we've seen this pop up, and I believe Oregon had a pilot program of sorts looking into this. Illinois toyed with it for a decade plus, the idea of possibly bringing this about or even doing a study on it. It always gets substantial pushback from a variety of different, individuals, those concerned about the cost, but also those concerned about privacy. How would they go about addressing those concerns? Because part of this has to be you're tracking somebody by the miles they drive. Are they going to be looking at the tachometer, or are they going to have a device in their vehicle tracking where they're going?
Well, that remains to be seen. I think that if this bill passes and a committee is established to study how the state would impose this per mile road user charge, that is something they would look at. I know that sometimes insurance companies that insure drivers and provide car insurance, per mile car insurance, will send a policyholder a tracker that they put in their vehicle, and the company would be able to track that driver's mileage and then charge them accordingly. That's the only thing I can think of for how the state might actually keep track appropriately of the driver's miles. But this bill doesn't really say how that would be enforced, and the mechanisms that the state would go to actually impose this per mile road charge, if indeed we see a bill next year that actually tries to introduce this per mile road charge.
Again, California having the highest gas taxes in the country. 51 cents a gallon back in 2021, but now that's up to 59 cents a gallon in 2025. And that's just the state tax. That's not the federal gas tax. That's on top of that. When you add that on, that goes up even more. So we'll be watching this closely, Maddie, as obviously a lot of states have toyed with this idea, but nothing's ever really truly advanced statewide. Will California be the true bellwether on that issue? We'll be watching. And while drivers look at that prospect, let's talk about California taxpayers covering $90 million for Planned Parenthood. Maddie, just a few days ago, we featured some of the debate from the Senate floor on this very issue. Governor Gavin Newsom signing that bill into law yesterday. That was pretty fast.
It was. It was a very fast move for one budget bill, but lawmakers really wanted to get this $90 million to Planned Parenthood quickly. Of course, that had its critics, particularly Assemblymember David Tonkipa, the Republican Assembly member from Fresno, said on the Assembly floor earlier this week that he is concerned about the state giving so much of its general fund revenue to one politically connected organization. And considering the fact that so many rural hospitals across the state are closing right now, and several others are in danger of closing, and even more have closed their labor and maternity wards, so women who want to give birth in their county can't now, he would like to see that money go towards helping rural hospitals up and down the state that are in danger of closing.
Also, you had others raising concerns about the lack of oversight, and even one Republican we featured talking about this is a $90 million check to a politically connected group, one particular politically connected group. So clearly there's a little bit of a divide in the California State House on that issue. Maddie, thank you so much for taking time with us from sunny California. It looks incredible out there as I'm stuck here in central Illinois and it's still chilly, but I'll tell you, 40 degrees feels like summer here. But those palm trees behind you look pretty enticing. Greatly appreciate you taking the time.